What happens when the CEO of a steakhouse chain goes undercover as a line cook, only to find out one of his employees is secretly sleeping in the storage room. Franklin Foster had inherited the steakhouse business from his father 5 years ago. 7 locations, all across Ohio. His dad had run it old school, tight, personal, hands-on. But since Franklin took over, he'd focused on scaling and systems. More tech, more managers, less of him in the kitchens. Lately, though, complaints had started trickling in: cold food, rude service, staff quitting mid-shift. He'd read every report, listen to every excuse. Still, something didn't sit right. The numbers weren't terrible, just off, like something was rotting under the surface, so he decided to find out for himself. He picked the Maple Heights location. It was the second oldest store, a mid-volume spot just outside Cleveland. The general manager, a woman named Carla, had been hired 3 months ago. Franklin had never met her. None of the staff had ever seen his face. He'd been too busy expanding to show up in person. That gave him one advantage. He shaved his beard, wore thick rimmed glasses, and dyed his hair darker. He'd done restaurant work in college, so he knew how to hold a knife. He created a fake identity, Illy, a new hire sent from a staffing agency, supposedly for a 2-week trial. The corporate office arranged it behind the scenes to keep it clean. The moment he stepped into the kitchen, the heat and clatter hit him like a wave. Sizzling pans shouted orders, the low buzz of a Friday night dinner rush. "You the new guy?" one of the cooks barked. "Yeah," Franklin nodded. "Illy's staffing agency sent me." Carla barely glanced at him. "You better not slow us down." He kept his head down. Learned fast. The grill was handled by a young guy named Mason, quiet, focused, no nonsense. There was a girl on prep, Fiona, who chopped with speed but flinched every time Carla came near. The dishwasher, a wiry teen named Alonzo, barely spoke to anyone. And then there was Curtis. Curtis was everywhere. Fryer, grill, dish pit, running to the freezer and back. The man looked about 30, lean, with tired eyes and a deep, raspy voice. "Hey, new guy," Curtis called out as Franklin was about to plate a steak. "Flip it again, you're searing it too long. Customers want medium, not hockey pucks." Franklin nodded, fixed it, and thanked him. Curtis just grinned. "You'll get the hang of it. First week's always hell." By the end of the night, Franklin's arms were sore, his clothes soaked through, and his respect for the crew had tripled. It wasn't laziness or incompetence. It was chaos. The place was short 4 people. He asked Fiona why during cleanup. "They quit last week," she said without looking up. "One got screamed at in front of customers. The rest just walked out." Carla came around the corner then, holding a clipboard and barking orders. "You, Illy, trash duty. Curtis, get the mop done faster." "I'm not staying here all night." Curtis muttered under his breath but didn't argue. Franklin caught him rubbing his lower back, wincing. Later, as they closed up, Franklin saw Curtis dragging a crate of onions toward the walk-in freezer. Something seemed off. He was too slow, like he was stalling. Franklin followed him in. Inside the storage room, past the shelves of condiments and frozen meat, was a stack of flattened boxes pushed into the corner. A rolled-up sleeping bag, a pillow in a trash bag. Curtis froze when he saw him. "Don't," Curtis said quickly. "Don't say anything. Just please, I clean up after myself. I don't steal, I just need a couple more weeks." Franklin stood there, stunned. "You sleep in here?" Curtis looked down. "Yeah, I didn't mean for it to be permanent. Landlord raised rent and I couldn't keep up. I work doubles. Carla won't let me cut shifts." "I figured. This was better than the street." Franklin didn't know what to say. His throat tightened. This was his company, his store, and a man was sleeping behind the freezer. "I'm gonna lose this job, aren't I?" Curtis asked quietly. Franklin swallowed. "No, man, no, just hang tight." He walked out, heart pounding. Something was broken here, not just the management, the whole system, and he was going to fix it, but first he needed to see more. Franklin returned the next afternoon without calling attention to himself. The shift started slow. A Wednesday lunch, light foot traffic, skeleton crew. Carla wasn't in yet, which made the kitchen feel, if not relaxed, at least bearable. Curtis was already on prep, chopping parsley with focus. His posture was tighter than the day before, as if he expected something to blow up at any moment. Franklin didn't mention the storage room, neither did Curtis. But when their eyes met, there was a flicker of understanding. A silent agreement to get through the day without drawing heat. Fiona showed up 10 minutes late. Her apron was wrinkled, hair tucked sloppily under her cap. As soon as she stepped in, Mason handed her a list of prep items without speaking. Fiona didn't thank him. She just nodded and got to work, eyes down. Franklin noticed something different about Mason today. He was more clipped. Not cold exactly, but impatient. He kept checking the order screen like he was waiting for something to go wrong. He didn't offer help, just executed his station with robotic precision. At noon, Carla walked in. She didn't say hello. Just headed straight to the expo line and flipped through the ticket stack like she was looking for evidence of failure. "Why is this one sitting?" she asked, tapping a printed slip. Mason didn't look up. "Waiting on fries." "Did you start them?" "I'm on grill." "Don't get clever." If you see a hold, jump in. If you wanted to be a specialist, you should have joined a union. Franklin watched Mason's jaw tighten. He turned back to the flat top and pressed down on a burger with more force than necessary. Minutes later, the door to the front swung open and a server walked in with a returned plate. A ribeye, untouched. "Table 22 says it's overcooked," the server said. Carla didn't even look at the plate. "Did they ask for medium rare?" "Yeah, and they said this is medium well." Carla turned to Franklin. "Who fired the ribeye?" "I did," Franklin replied. "Jesus, you eyeballing temps." "I used the thermometer." "Then use your eyes next time too. Red center means red. Do it again now." "Not in 5 minutes. Now." Franklin moved to the cooler in silence. As he seasoned the replacement, Curtis came over and slid a tray of fries onto the plating station. "Here," he said under his breath, "don't let her get in your head. She rotates blame like clockwork." Franklin nodded once and kept working. His hands moved fast, but his mind was somewhere else. He started noticing it more now, the way Carla managed. She didn't give direction, she gave pressure, not constructive pressure, just volume and tension. And every time something went wrong, she isolated the problem to a single person, never the system, never staffing issues, never her. At 2:45, the lunch rush tapered off. Carla disappeared into the office. Curtis leaned against the prep table, wiping his face with a towel. "You working dinner too?" Franklin asked. "Yeah, double today, again." Franklin glanced at the schedule posted above the sink. Curtis's name was everywhere, 6 days, mostly doubles. "You ever get a full day off?" "Only when I get sick, which I try not to do." "Sick means 0. You talked to Carla about that?" Curtis gave a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Yeah. Once, she said if I wanted fewer hours, she'd find someone who wanted more." Franklin was about to respond when Fiona dropped a metal mixing bowl. It clattered to the floor, spinning before settling. She didn't move, just stared at it. Curtis walked over and picked it up for her. "You good?" Fiona nodded, then shook her head. I'm really trying, I haven't seen my kid awake in 4 days." Curtis rested a hand on the table. "You want me to talk to her for you?" "No, please, it'll make it worse." Franklin stepped out for a minute, not to take a break, just to breathe. He stood behind the building near the dumpsters and watched an employee from another store unload a truck across the lot. It was a franchise location, different team, same logo. The kid looked calm. The manager helped him unload. They were talking, laughing even. Franklin had spent the last year strategizing a new line of locations in Indiana. But he hadn't once walked into Maple Heights. And now here he was, watching one of his employees crack under pressure while another lived behind a freezer. When he returned, Carla was on the phone in the office. Franklin overheard her through the cracked door. "No, I don't need another body who calls off twice a week. I need people who show up and shut up. If they can't handle it, they can leave." Franklin walked past the office and into the kitchen. Fiona was seated on an overturned bucket, dicing tomatoes with robotic rhythm. Curtis was wiping down the grill, shoulders hunched. Mason had stepped outside. Curtis glanced over. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Franklin didn't answer right away. "I've got a question. Shoot." "If you could fix one thing here, just one, what would it be?" Curtis set the rag down. "Accountability, not for us, for her. If she messes up, nothing happens. If we mess up, we get hours cut, shifts changed, or worse." Franklin nodded slowly. "All right." Later that afternoon, a new prep cook arrived. She was young, maybe 20. Carla walked her through the line, speaking loud enough for the entire kitchen to hear. "If you want to last, stay focused. Don't listen to complaints. Half these people don't know what hard work looks like." Franklin glanced at Curtis. His jaw was locked. Fiona kept her head down. The new girl looked uncomfortable but nodded along. At the end of the shift, as they stacked chairs and wiped down counters, Carla asked Franklin to stay behind. "You've got speed," she said, "but you need to sharpen your instincts. You're not in culinary school anymore." "I've never been." She waved a hand dismissively. "Whatever. Just don't get too friendly with that one," she said, nodding toward Fiona. "She's always on the verge of some breakdown. And Curtis, he'll burn out soon. You don't want to be tied to that." Franklin stared at her. "Why do you say that?" "Because I've been doing this 20 years. I know who lasts and who doesn't." He nodded once, then walked out without another word. That night, he sat in his car and stared at the red glow of the restaurant sign in the rearview mirror. These people were holding the place together with duct tape and grit, and Carla was treating them like they were the problem. He picked up his phone and called corporate. "I'm extending my undercover assignment," he said. "2 more days, minimum, and I want the district HR manager at Maple Heights by Friday morning." Quietly, he hung up. Then he drove home, heart heavy, mind sharp. The following morning he was back at the line before sunrise. And this time, he wasn't just watching. He was preparing to burn the rot out, one decision at a time. By Thursday morning, Franklin was done observing. He stepped into the back entrance of the Maple Heights location at 6:45 a.m., still in his illy disguise but with a different posture. His shoulders carried intention now. Curtis was already inside, stacking dry goods near the pantry. The early shift cook was late again, which meant Curtis was setting up alone. "Morning," Franklin said. Curtis gave a quick nod but didn't stop moving. Fridge was left cracked again. "Chicken temp high. Toss the tray." Franklin glanced at the waste log and saw Curtis had logged the disposal already, complete with date, time, and initials. He didn't say anything, just made a mental note. A few minutes later, Mason entered through the side door. His uniform was clean, but he looked like he hadn't slept. He walked straight to the sink, washed his hands, and started breaking down the prep list without needing to be told. "Do you ever stop?" Franklin asked, keeping his voice low. Mason didn't look up. "Not while I'm on the clock." Carla arrived at 7:15, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. She offered no greeting, just pivoted directly to the whiteboard and started wiping schedules without checking if anyone was watching. "Fiona's off today," she said out loud, more to herself than to the room. "That means Curtis covers prep, again." Curtis didn't respond, he just kept unpacking lettuce. Franklin turned to Carla. "Can I ask why Fiona's off?" Carla looked over, eyes narrowed. "Why? Just asking if it was her request or yours." She raised her eyebrows. "It's not your business. You're here to cook, not track PTO." Franklin nodded once and turned away, but he filed it. Again. By 9, the restaurant had opened and the first wave of tickets started coming in. A small group from the local bank, an older couple who always ordered well done, and a trucker who sat at the bar. Nothing heavy yet, but the kitchen was already straining. The utility cook hadn't shown again, and Carla hadn't called anyone in to replace him. "Can you run Expo?" Curtis asked Franklin quietly, already moving to cover the flat top. Franklin didn't hesitate. "Yeah." He stepped to the pass, grabbed the first ticket, and started calling orders clearly without shouting. Curtis adjusted instantly, calling back times. Mason grabbed sauté without needing to be told. They made it through the next hour without a single return. At 10:30, the district HR manager, a sharp-eyed woman named Renee, arrived. She didn't identify herself to the staff. She simply sat at a corner booth with a notepad and ordered coffee. Carla didn't notice her. She was too busy berating the server about table turnover. Franklin dried his hands and stepped outside to make a call. When he returned, Carla was by the bar talking to a delivery rep. "I don't care what the invoice says," she snapped. "I didn't order that much flank. Take it back or I'm not signing." Renee's eyes tracked the entire thing silently. At 11:15, a man in a maintenance uniform stepped out of the restroom and approached the counter. "Toilet's backed up," he said. "Overflowing. Again." Carla waved him off. "Then post a sign and lock it." "I'm not calling plumbing again for the same garbage." Franklin leaned closer to Curtis. "She's not going to fix it." Curtis shook his head. "Happens twice a week. Staff use the alley if it gets bad." "You're kidding." "I wish." Lunch hit hard at 11:45. A local construction crew filled the booths, followed by a group of teachers from the elementary school. Orders came in fast. The grill filled. The fryer overloaded. Curtis slipped once, over-rotated a basket, and a splash of hot oil hit his forearm. He hissed, stepped back, and grabbed a towel. Carla saw it from the other end of the kitchen. "If you're going to mess around, at least don't do it near the food." Curtis didn't answer. He just rinsed the burn under cold water, wrapped it tight, and went back to the line. Renee looked directly at Franklin from her booth. He gave a slight nod. By 1:30, the rush slowed just enough for Franklin to signal the moment. He stepped forward to the center of the kitchen, pulled off the glasses, and wiped the dye from his hairline with a damp towel he'd tucked in earlier. Then he turned to face the room. "I'm Franklin Foster," he said. "Owner and CEO of this company." The kitchen froze. Mason dropped the spatula. Curtis blinked, unsure. Carla didn't move at first, then her face drained of color. "I've spent the last few days working your line," he continued. "Watching, listening, and learning. And what I've seen here is unacceptable. Not because of you," he looked at Curtis, then Mason, "but because of what's been allowed to happen to you." Carla finally spoke. "You can't just—" Franklin raised a hand. "You've had your turn." He turned toward Renee, who stood and walked into the kitchen beside him. "I've asked HR to conduct a full review of this location. Effective immediately, Carla. You're relieved of your position. You'll be escorted out after a brief exit interview." Carla's mouth opened, then closed. She looked around for someone to back her up, but no one spoke. Franklin didn't yell. He didn't need to. "You've created a culture of fear. You've ignored basic safety. You've piled overtime on a skeleton crew and punished people for trying to hold the place together. That ends now." Carla stepped toward him, voice tight. "You don't understand what it's like down here. You walk in for 3 days and think you know everything." He held her gaze. "I've walked in for 3 days and seen more integrity from your crew than I've seen in some regional meetings. That's all I need to know." She left without another word. Renee followed her into the office. Franklin turned back to the team. "Curtis," he said, "HR will be setting you up in temporary housing by tonight. Then we'll help you secure something permanent. You shouldn't be sleeping behind a freezer to keep this place running." Curtis exhaled slowly, like his lungs had been locked up for days. "Mason," Franklin continued, "you're getting a raise and a schedule cutback. We'll reassign some of your duties till we're fully staffed again." Mason just nodded once, eyes unreadable. "And Fiona," Franklin said, "I've already spoken with her. She's being moved to our new training program. She'll be off the line with regular hours and full benefits." He turned back to the group. "We're hiring immediately. No more short-staffed shifts, and I'll be back in 2 weeks to see it for myself." He paused. "I'm not here to make speeches. I'm here because I let this place drift too far from what it's supposed to be. That part's on me." No one applauded, no one cheered. But for the first time since Franklin walked in, the kitchen felt still. Not tense, just quiet, like something was finally about to shift. He stepped outside, peeled off the apron, and looked at the red sign above the doors. Then he took out his phone, opened the Notes app, and typed a single sentence: "No more distance." The following Monday, Franklin returned to Maple Heights, this time in a crisp navy button-down and jeans, no disguise. He walked through the front entrance just after opening. The smell of grilled onions and butter hit him immediately, but something else lingered too: calm. He stepped into the kitchen to the sound of prep knives tapping against cutting boards. Mason was on the grill, his movements deliberate but unhurried. Fiona wasn't there. She'd started her new role that morning at the training center across town. In her place was a new hire, a quiet but focused woman named Lacey who sliced mushrooms with practiced ease. Curtis looked up from the fryer. His eyes were clearer now. The dark circles were still there, but lighter. He nodded once at Franklin, who returned it. Franklin turned to the new floor manager, Angela, transferred from the Strongsville location. She stood near the expo line, clipboard in hand, calmly giving instructions to the morning server. Her voice was low, but every word landed. She noticed Franklin and walked over. "We got the last of the staff positions filled yesterday," she said. "Training's underway. No one's working more than 5 shifts a week unless they ask." "Anyone ask?" Curtis wanted an extra shift on Thursdays. "Said it keeps him busy." Franklin glanced at him. "Only if he's rotating stations." Angela smiled faintly. "He is, and he asked to mentor Lacey, said he wanted her to learn the right way." A few minutes later, Curtis approached Franklin during a lull, wiping his hands on a towel. "I stopped sleeping here," he said quietly, nodding toward the back. "Place you set me up with, it's not much, but it's mine. I got a key." Franklin nodded. "You deserve more than a key. You've been carrying this place. I wasn't sure you'd actually follow through. I almost didn't come down here at all. That was my mistake." Curtis folded his arms. "You fixed it." "No, I started fixing it. We've still got work to do." Curtis gave a short laugh. "At least now it's worth doing." Later, in the break room newly painted and stocked with fresh supplies, Franklin sat with Mason over coffee. Nothing formal, just 2 people who'd been in the fire together. Mason didn't talk much at first. He sipped slowly and stared at the old attendance sheet still pinned to the wall. Then he set the cup down. "You know, I almost walked the week before you got here. I figured. I stayed because of Curtis. He's the reason half of us didn't quit. He kept it moving when everything else was falling apart." Franklin leaned forward. "I've got a question. You ever think about running a kitchen?" Mason looked up, uncertain. "I don't know, maybe, haven't thought about it." "I have," Franklin said. "You've got standards, you don't take shortcuts. You hold the line even when no one's looking." Mason didn't respond right away. Then, "I'd want to do it differently. I'd expect nothing less. Think about it." They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space between them. By mid-afternoon, Franklin toured the back hallway near the storage room. The makeshift bedding was gone. The flattened boxes had been cleared. The space had been turned into overflow shelving, new labels, organized inventory, and a padlock on the door. Renee had ordered it repurposed to prevent any future misuse. Angela joined him there. "Staff's been asking if you're coming back again," she said. "I will, not as a secret this time. They're talking about what happened, not in a gossipy way, just they know someone noticed." That it mattered. Franklin looked around. "It should always matter." She nodded once. "What do you want this store to be in 6 months?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "A place where no one has to carry more than they can handle. A place where the people who make the food feel seen." Angela smiled, then turned back toward the kitchen. The next morning, Franklin returned to headquarters. He walked into the leadership meeting 10 minutes early and waited as the rest of the executives trickled in. When they finally settled, he stood without notes. "I went undercover because I didn't trust what I was hearing," he said. "I thought I'd find laziness or maybe incompetence. What I found was people holding the line at personal cost, invisible labor, unseen effort. And a system that let it happen." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "From now on, every store gets quarterly staff reviews conducted anonymously. Every GM is held to a coaching standard, not just a performance one. And every regional director will spend 1 week a year working line shifts, no exceptions." One of the directors raised a brow. "That's a lot of hours pulled from leadership." "That's the point," Franklin said. "If you can't handle frontline work, you shouldn't be leading people who do." The room fell quiet. "There's more," he continued. "We're creating an emergency housing assistance program for employees in crisis. Curtis was the first to use it. He won't be the last." A murmur ran through the table. "And starting next quarter, we're implementing a mentorship track. Not for managers, for workers. We're going to find the Curtises and the Fionas and give them a path forward." Another executive leaned forward. "That'll cost money. So does turnover. So does burnout. So do lawsuits." No one argued after that. When the meeting ended, Franklin returned to his office. His assistant had left a note on his desk, a handwritten thank you from Fiona. She'd drawn a small sketch of her daughter in the corner, smiling and holding a lunchbox. He didn't frame it. He pinned it to the corkboard next to his desk, eye level. A week later, he was back in the Maple Heights kitchen, this time shadowing Lacey. She fumbled a bit with the flat top temps, and Curtis stepped in with a quiet correction. Lacey looked up. "I thought I had it." "You almost did," Curtis said, "but almost gets you a send back." Franklin watched from a distance, arms folded. The kitchen moved smoother now, not perfect but aligned, no shouting, no fear, just people doing good work, shoulder to shoulder. As the dinner rush began, Franklin stepped out to the dining room and sat at the bar. A server approached. "Table for one?" she asked. "No," he said, glancing back toward the kitchen. "Just watching the team," she smiled. "They're good, feels different now," he nodded. "It is." He stayed for a while, watching the rhythm of the place. The clatter of pans, the warmth of food hitting plates, and behind it all, people who finally had room to breathe. He didn't need a disguise anymore, he just needed to keep showing up.